So today, last but not at all least, we welcome our speaker, Professor Gennaro Auletta, who's from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Professor Auletta has done much work on the philosophy of science, particularly in the area of quantum mechanics. His recent book, Quantum Mechanics, A Modern Perspective, was just published this year by Cambridge University Press, and he's in process of preparing a much longer book even than that on the philosophy of science in many of its aspects. And we're delighted that he's come over today and he's going to speak to us on information, biological complexity and emergence. So thank you much.
Thank you so much. I thank for all the people coming here, from you, ladies and gentlemen, and especially would like to thank Dennis for this kind of invitation. So I will speak of emergence of biological systems. So the concept of emergence was introduced by John Stuart Mill and the Conway Young Morgan in the Anglo-Saxon tradition for denoting a kind of process in which the result is not the consequence of a mechanic summation of input forces. That is, the result is somehow bigger or different than what was the start of the process. Now, what is peculiar to life is that life represents a very peculiar combination of information and function. This is the main point of my talk. Functions are those elements that make life more than a pure piece of chemistry. That is, in chemistry or even physics, there are no functions at all. This means that a stone has in itself no function. That is, a ape or a human can use a stone like an anvil, but a stone is not in itself, has in itself no functionality at all. So it is a pure biological concept, function. Information, on the other hand, is fundamental for controlling how functions are implemented. This is what I shall try to explain in the following. Now, let's first understand the way in which in our world, even from a pure physical point of view, information is acquired. This is very important to understand. Information is acquired in a three-step process, or if you will, in a three-element process. First of all, any process of information acquisition consists of three fundamental elements: an input system displaying several possible behaviors and about which we like to be informed. This is a source of variety. This is something from which we like to acquire information. It must be a variety because otherwise it would be for us meaningless. Secondly, we need an interface that allows to be connected with this input system. Any information acquisition consists in catching some effects produced by the source. This is a coupling device. Why? Because in general we don't have access directly to this information source. So we need to understand to some effects what was the informational import of the source. Third, we need a selection device able to choose among the possible options, where the signal, for instance, means noxious or beneficial for an organism. The crucial point is to understand is that such a selection can tell something about the input system only thanks to the coupling device, that is, only thanks to the second step. So this final selection step will tell you something about the original system, about the source of variety, only thanks to the coupling. Now, what is information? Information is very, very difficult to define. For me, it's a formal quantity. For instance, the ordering of the letters on a page does not depend on the physical or chemical characters of the page. For this reason, information, although strictly associated with thermodynamic entropy, is not as such entropy. Information comes out in the first sense as codified information. A code is a combinatorics of a finite number of elementary units, like the alphabetic letters, or also like the words, when we speak, when we have a phrase, a sentence, according to some syntactic rules. In general, any information source must be codified. Secondly, information can be shared. This is allowed by the coupling device above, I have described it above. But we have information sharing anytime two persons know the same thing. even if they have acquired this piece of information in fully independent ways. For instance, if I read something in a newspaper in Rome, and then we read the same information in London, and we meet in Paris, we know that we already share information. And this was even before our meeting. Or, for giving another example, I am telling something that is understood by you. That is, we shared information also before meeting. It's very important. There are amazing features in the physical world, especially in quantum mechanics, bound with this element. That is, the fact that quantum systems can share information even if they never met in our world before. Finally, information can be selected, as said above. Information selection happens, for instance, anytime we choose a certain option. The human brain, during development, reinforces certain connections and kills many others. So information selection has a thermodynamic cost, while information sharing has no cost at all, and is therefore irreversible. Information sharing and selection are the only two allowed operations with information. That is, we cannot do otherwise, only share information or select it. There are no other possibilities. So let's consider what is a bacterium. A bacterium is the most elementary form of life and shows three important subsystems. That is the genome, the place of metabolism, that is the cytoplasm, and the cellular membrane. As we shall see, these systems represent an integration with information aspects we have considered before. So I would like to establish a sort of connection between the structure of a very elementary organism like a bacterium and the informational aspects I have considered before. So let's consider first of all DNA, that is the genome. DNA is a source of variety. Why? DNA is an information codifier. It can combine in different ways the four fundamental letters A, C, G, T, and moreover, as you know, A is negative of T, H, G of G, so that we have two subcodes, but this is not very important. What is important here is that DNA is also the internal source of variety of the organism, because it guarantees both transmission of information over the generations, but also mutations, variations. Moreover, DNA is in a continuous process of reshuffling, recombination, dislocation, and so on of its elements. It recombines its elements over and over and over. It is important to understand that none of these activities diminishes of a bit its role of information codification. So you can combine every piece of DNA, but still it is an information codifier. It's very, very strange, because it is really amazing to a certain sense. Now the point is, how does the DNA that? This miracle, for me, because it is to a certain sense a true miracle, even if in a metaphoric sense of the word, is allowed by a strict separation between information combinatorics and chemical bonds. That is the bases, that is the black elements on the right. The bases, that is the letters of the DNA code, are on a single strand, are not directly connected with each other. This is the main point to understand here. But they are only connected through the sugar phosphate backbone on the left, that is the green and the red part. This is the only part that is directly connected from a chemical point of view, but the letters are separated. This means that the sequence of bases does not depend on the chemistry. That is, you can have, in principle, you can have any arbitrary sequence. Any arbitrary sequence. You may have any possible succession of letters. And this does not depend directly on the chemistry. This is a necessary requirement for having information, because if you don't have a separation between chemistry, pure chemistry, or pure physics, and information combinatorics, you cannot speak of information. This is a necessary requirement. Now, the point is that also atoms and molecules show a certain combinatorics. This is a fact. However, this combinatorics does not represent information, because the particle arrangement depends on the physical interactions. And there are, therefore, no alternative ways to build atoms or molecules. Not at all. So, this is the main reason. It is true that some molecules can be in different shapes, but this again not a code, because the number of molecules that can be in different shapes, this is very small subset of all possible molecules. And moreover, for several reasons that I could even speak about later if you like, it is not really a code. So let us now come back to the second aspect of an organism, that is metabolism, because I have spoken of DNA as a source of variety. Now I like to speak of metabolism. What is really amazing about metabolism? This is a very complex. This is a universal chart of metabolism. What is amazing is that the metabolism of any living being of the earth must fit here somewhere. Every metabolism. This is incredible. That is, every metabolism of any organism, even very complex as humans, finally reduced to a small number of typical interactions, metabolic interactions. Even if metabolism can be very complex, because also a very elementary bacterium, like the E. coli, for instance, it has more than 1,000 of interactions. So it is something really very complex from another point of view. So, as I have said, it is a huge array of reactions, but they can be reduced to a very few kinds. The general function of metabolism is very clear, is to allow entropic exchanges with the environment for acquiring good energy. That is, energy with low entropy. Therefore, the metabolic system is the part of the organism that allows the coupling with the environment. I know that when I have spoken about information, I have said information comes in three varieties. That is, as a source of variety. When you acquire information, you need a source of variety, you need a coupling, and you need a selection. Now, what I am trying to show is the DNA is the source of variety. Metabolism allows for the coupling with the environment, and then we will see also the selection device. Now, the first kind of chemical reactions that are the so-called catabolic reactions for obtaining energy from the breakdown of complex molecules. The second type of reactions are the so-called anabolic reactions for building complex molecules and therefore to maintain the order of the organism against a spontaneous tendency to disruption. For instance, to growing entropy. And now we come to the third aspect of a living being, the membrane. Because the membrane is the selector of the organism. It is a true selector. Why? Because it is what separates and also unites the biological self with the no-self. It is constituted of two layers of lipids with the head towards water and the trophobic tail into the opposite direction. The function of the membrane is to allow controlled exchanges necessary for metabolism with the environment. It's very important. That is, without a segregation of an organism relative to the environment, you would not control these exchanges. And so, without such kind of exchanges, I mean without controlled exchanges, the cell would depend on the entropic fluxes controlled from the outside. But this is exactly what happens for any other physical system of the water, that is, for any prebiotic or abiotic system. This is exactly what happens. For instance, let's take the banal cells. The banal cells are hexagonal structures that arise spontaneously when a liquid trapped between the two metal layers and heated here from above beyond the critical threshold are formed. Banal cells are an interesting example of self-organization, but still depend on external heater. So they cannot control the process of the entropic exchanges or the energetic exchanges with the environment. But this is exactly what any bacterium can do, or any other organism. So this is very interesting to know. So the membrane does this. You have here, this is a very nice image I have taken from the web. You can see the two layers of fats, and there are many proteins inside that guarantee for exchange, for fluxes and so on, from the inside to outside the vessels. So the organism, my point is that the organism is a systemic unit. It's a systemic unity. That is these three aspects: a processor of information, also guaranteeing variety, a coupling system allowing for the regulation of the organism, and finally a selecting system for allowing both segregation and connection between self and non-self, all that constitutes a world. There is no other example in nature of such an organized unity. This is what makes organisms information acquiring devices, but also information controlling devices, as I will tell later on. But obviously also systems for acquiring information, but also for controlling. So let us take a very, very, very easy example taken from biology, chemotaxis. This is again bacterium, again the Escherichia coli, the E. coli, that provides a beautiful example for that. That is, this bacterium looks for a major concentration of sugar in the fluids, and it senses the environment for controlling whether it swims in the right direction or not. If not, it will tumble, and because it will invert the rotation of its flagella. The flagella, when he swims in the right direction, the flagella turn counterclockwise. When he invert the motion that is clockwise, then he will tumble. So he will tumble, and in this way find a new random direction, purely random at the beginning. But the interesting point is that through a series of tumbling, straight swimming, tumbling, it will finally find the source. And in general, it will find the source. So the point is, it is a pure mechanical input-output computation? Not at all, because the whole mechanism is self-regulated. How is it regulated? To the genetic and the metabolic system, a huge array of chemical reactions whose purpose is to compare and fine-tune levels of concentration of reactants and timing of reactions. Now, this next slide is a little bit more technical. I will not insist on that, but who is interested can see that the organism can be conceived as a system through which we have first a signal transduction from the exterior, then this signal goes to the sensory system, to a transmitter, and then it goes to the regulatory system. And this array this incredible array of relations of the metabolic system of this regulative part, together with the concourse of the genetic system, because obviously certain protein must be produced at specific times, at specific places, in a specific amount, and so on, then all that guarantees the ability of the organism to control, to have an effect, to have a motor reaction that is appropriate to the received input. And so to control, to monitor external information. But not only to monitor, because what is incredible for life is that any organism will change its environment in one way or the other. There is no organism on Earth that will not change its environment in one way or the other. And an incredible example of that is obviously is represented by plants that have produced the atmosphere on Earth as we know right now. Because obviously before the birth of plants it was not at all in this way. Now, how such a miracle? The point is that functions are realized by means of operations. In general, very complex spatial arrangements and temporal sequences of chemical reactions to attain certain specific outcomes that are necessary for the organisms. This means that functions cannot exist without information control. Indeed, the organism must be able to compare the actual outcome with the desired one, and either go on with this operation at hand or stop it and start again. This is exactly what happens continuously in the organism. If the organism thinks somehow, because obviously it has not a brain, a bacterium for instance, but if the bacterium senses that a certain operation is not going in the good direction, it will stop it and start it again. So it is very interesting. This in turn implies that the organism must be able to have goals, that is, inbuilt mechanisms allowing the possibility to choose among diverse and appropriate mechanisms, even alternative operations, for the sake of its own survival. Goals are the result of a selective fork. This leads us back to the issue of emergence, but I like to postpone still a little bit this examination. So, goals are the result of the fact that the organism is a system that has reached a huge level of complexity. then you have a fork here. Either you are able to control some information on the environment, or you will die. So it is a sharp alternative. So the functions, first of all, require complexity. And complex systems are characterized by several properties. I will indicate here 4 main properties. The first property of a complex systems is hierarchy. So complex systems are a particular variety of self-organizing systems showing these properties, and hierarchy means A, different levels of order and complexity, and B, structures and webs of relations at each level. This allows for modularization and information encapsulation. This means that you can have parts of the complex systems that are blind to other parts, simply because the organism shows this hierarchy of levels of complexity. Here is a very nice example that is the way in which, starting from the pure double strand of DNA, and by covering it with chromatin and so on, you arrive finally to the structure of the chromosome. So obviously these are very different scales, this is clear. You can follow here the centrosome at the beginning, this red point, and it is in the middle of the X of the chromosome, and so on. I think this is a very nice example. Also of information encapsulation, because in order to have access to the DNA information, you need somehow to undo the package. This is like a package, you know, the information packed in. You need to open such a thing to extract information. Now, the second aspect is the complex systems are top-down systems. What means that complex systems show both bottom-up effects and top-down causation. It is very important to understand that it is impossible to directly act from above or from below, if not with the concurrence of dynamic causation modes at the same level, under consideration. For instance, an electron, this is a physical level, can be used for acquiring energy only if there are chemical reactions able to do that at that level. For this reason, influences from below are rather conditions of possibility, that is variety, coming from below. But influences from above are rather formal constraints canalizing certain processes. That is, the dynamic of a system is somehow canalized along certain paths from formal constraints. For instance, if you take some relation, if you build a very simple web with several nodes connected, obviously the type of connection, the quality of these interconnections will have certain specific results, and so the several processes occurring in this network will depend on the way in which the different units are interrelated. Now, a third aspect of complex systems is that there are motifs. That these complex systems show recurrent motifs at different scales. Often they are fractals, very beautiful fractals. Here is a bacterial colony of Penibacillus dendriformis after 3 days growth. It's very interesting, very nice, I think. Motifs recurrence is fundamental for a self-replicating system, because this is very important for organisms. And we have very nice examples of that at any scale. Finally, organisms are plastic. Complex systems like organisms show plasticity and adaptability. The necessary requirement is that no subsystem works optimally, otherwise the whole system would break down. That is, if you have subsystems working perfectly, each subsystem would work apart finally. So the system would break down, the whole system. So this means that we have always modularization together with integration, and so also coadaptation to the environment. This means that the fact that any operation cannot be fulfilled perfectly by a subsystem, this means that several subsystems also are integrated. It's very important. Now, there is an interesting consequence. That is, from the above consideration, a crucial consequence follows. At any level of complexity and in any subsystem, complex systems are networks showing hubs. Hubs are those elements of the network that are crucial for its functioning. I have shown here this small sub-network of red elements. This is a hub. This implies that we can change or even eliminate many elements or connections of the network, but provided that these are not part of a hub, the network suffers no substantial damages. That this can still work. This is exactly what happens for everybody of us. I mean, we know very well that we have sometimes some impairments in our organs, but we still can be alive, even with in many conditions. The same is true for many organisms. So let's come back to the issue of biological functions. So we have biological functions when some fundamental requirements are met. The first is that a function does not strictly depend on a structure. Indeed, different structures can deploy the same function. However, some structural hub is always necessary. For instance, many different wing-like structures are good for flying, but there are some aerodynamic requirements to fulfill. This is obvious. So, this is the first point that is important. The fact that several structures can deploy the same function is called degeneracy. Secondly, any function is always instantiated in a certain chemical operation. However, it does not depend on that. Quite the opposite. Thanks to the formal constraints from above, the operation is controlled in its deploying a function. Third, every function is connected with needs and therefore the goals of the whole organism. Functions of organism parts do not exist if not in a metaphoric sense. Fifth, it depends, the function, on information codification, DNA, but it is not an immediate consequence of it, as we shall see now. So functions depend on information codification on DNA, but they are not an immediate consequence of DNA. So let us consider now the passage from information to function. Transcription is the operation through which the information contained in one strand of DNA is copied on the messenger RNA. Okay? So it is passed from the DNA to this intermediate structure that is called RNA. Now we have translation. After codifying sequences have been separated from non-codified sequences, the messenger RNA is brought out of the nucleus to the protein's fabrics. The ribosomes shown here is this sort of structure in the middle there, where thanks to the incoming transfer RNA, the translation process occurs. That is, here is the direction of translations, the wall here is the ribosome, and here you have the outgoing protein. You have the outgoing protein. Now, the point is, it is important to understand that mRNA, the messenger RNA, represents a set of instructions for building a protein, while DNA represents only codified information. This means that the order of the different bases is crucial, otherwise there would be equivocal instructions. Indeed, to take an example, the genetic code distinguishes among the following sequences, giving rise to different amino acids. That is, if I take the three elements, CAU, I can have CAU, this is histidine. I can have AUC, that is isoleucine. I can have CUA, leucine. I can have UCA, this is serine. ACU, threonine, and so on. All the 6 possible permutations. This is very interesting, but this means that the sequence is meaningful, and it must be necessarily so. This is not by chance. It is also very important to consider that different permutations of the same triplet never occur for codifying the same amino acids. Otherwise, given to the possibility of different permutations, this would be again equivocal. Ora, the point, I think, the very important point is to understand that these requirements are dictated by pure informational consideration. That is, these requirements are a consequence of informational combinatorics, not of chemistry. Chemistry has nothing to do with that. Now, the astonishing fact about life is that it is able to connect so diverse aspects as information and the function, that is complexity. Apparently, there is no connection at all between these two aspects. why should a certain sequence of bases code for a specific protein? What is not understood is that information expression giving rise to a whole dynamic process in which the building of a protein is the final step, this is the process that has been selected. It is the word, and not simply information codification or the protein. This would be totally ununderstandable if we do not consider that selection always operates together with formal constraints. Selection canalizes a process along a certain path, but the constraints guarantee that such process is not undermined by perturbation coming from other processes that occur more or less simultaneously. This is the point. And this is obviously also the reason of modularization. That is, without formal constraints, the process is not maintained in specific channels in order to avoid perturbation coming from other sources. So, selection alone cannot do anything without the concurrence, at least at this level of complexity. Selection cannot do anything without the concurrence of formal constraints. Now I can develop the concept of emergence. What emergence means? We have emergence every time, some variety, inducing bottom-up effects, mostly a source of perturbation, at least at the beginning, activates some formal constraints that are dormant, but able to concur to top-down canalize a process that can in turn activate a new configuration of interdependencies, resulting finally in a true novelty. That is, it is a complex process in which I start with a variety. This variety activates constraints. These constraints canalize a process, and this canalization produces new configurations. So, new forms of order. New forms of order. And this is what we call emergence. That is the effect of a very complex dynamical process in which, starting from a source of perturbation and from some constraints, we have both canalization and interdependencies among the different parts of the system. Now, the issues of convergence. One of the most interesting features of evolution is convergence, studied here in Cambridge by Conway Morris. It can be shown to be almost ubiquitous. The eye is appeared on our Earth at least twice. Bat wings are analog of bird wings or insect wings, and so on. When we have convergences, this is at least my opinion, we have the signature that we also have a true biological functionality. Indeed, the mechanism is here a particular example of emergence. The general explanation of convergences should then be the following. The degeneracy of several structures, even in distant species, relative to a given functions, it has the fact that different structures can give rise to the same function, allows for a pool of pre-existing structures able more or less to be used by successive excitation, that is successive use, for deploying a certain function. This assures the necessary variability at the start. Then the fact that any function has a crucial structural hub for displaying itself assures that a subset of this pool will be selected. In other words, variability plus crucial structural elements will determine convergence. So again, variety at the beginning, and you have a pool of different structures, plus or minus, able to playing a certain functionality, and then some are selected in a very complex process, and obviously you have also convergences as a result. So what I would like really to suggest is that we need a new research program, at least my own team, we in Rome are interested in that, a research program focused on three main points. First of all, allowing a new intelligibility of empirical data. Secondly, proposing a new mechanism of explanation that let cross-mechanical causation and formal constraints giving rise to top-down processes. Third, understanding information as a formal category connected with both physical aspects, like entropy exchange, and biological ones, functions. This would be a cross-disciplinary project where we have integrated cognition, in which science, philosophy, and theology of nature can have a place. Second, many scientific fields with a common philosophical architecture and some theological insights. Third, intelligibility is what allows us to do the ontological inferences and what is common to these three fields, as very nicely put, very nicely written by Portinger. Science is providing the necessary empirical data, but also showing a trend to universal knowledge, which cannot be fulfilled by scientific means. Philosophy of nature is providing a dynamic and a critical bridge between science and theology, especially about the general characters of nature. Theology providing the ultimate horizon of intelligibility that neither science nor philosophy can reach. This is really very important for me. That is that each field can find its own place here. I repeat, science is providing the data, the empirical data, because without empirical data it's difficult to do consistent advances in cognition. But philosophy of nature providing also an interesting bridge and also the necessary scaffold for doing that. And theology is providing the ultimate horizon of intelligibility. So, for me, there are at least three very important theological issues here involved. That is an issue I would call this emergent monism. God, and I am almost literally using words taken from the big work of St. Thomas of Aquinas, that is the Summa Theologia, an emergent monism, that is God as the being, whose being every finite reality takes part of. The ultimate source of any being. And so, any being will share something due to that. A world of growing complexification, bringing major perfection to the world. Sorry for the it is not written in a nice way. What God is in its unity and simplicity, St. Thomas tells, creatures are individual and diversity. And finally, a creation in which finite causes are not suppressed in their mode of being, but conspire with the action of the Creator. So I think this could be an interesting way to consider the problems. And for this reason, I like very much the issue of emergence, because I think that emergence puts together, at least understood in this way, two different aspects that we like. On the one hand, the issue of the novelty, of the variety of our world, so of the difference among different beings, but also the issue of the similarity of our beings, because in the term emergence is implied somehow the idea that something comes out from something else. And so the idea of a monism, of something connected universally, every being in the world. I think this is very important. So the concept of emergence is a sort of, at least for me, a sort of double-faced concept, a concept having two different legs somehow. And this is the reason why I like so much this concept and why I would like to speak of emergent monism. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gennaro, and thank you for finishing so we can have plenty of discussion and questions. So, over to you for any points to raise and questions. Yes, please.
I just wondered, ultimately, how fundamental can this model be? By that I mean, what does it say about the nature of information from a quantum mechanical point of view? How do you remove the observer effect, the fact that you make a decision when you measure? Is there such a thing as an objective reality? Is there an objective fact?
I think that we should distinguish here between relationality and subjectivity. These are two different issues. That is, we have determination in quantum mechanics anytime several systems interact, several systems open to the environment. You don't need necessarily an observer, and neither a human observer. So the problem is that what quantum mechanics shows, and this, I think this is the same issue for information somehow, is that you cannot attribute intrinsic properties to a system. That is, you cannot say this system has in itself such properties. But the properties depend on the way in which the system is connected or interacting with other systems. And I think the same is for information. That is, you cannot speak of information without determining the way in which this information is handled with, that is, it is acquired, selected, and so on, shared, and so on. So both quantum mechanical systems and, if you will, information as a fundamental quantity in nature show this fundamental relationality. But this does not directly imply that you need human observers. Obviously, it remains also true that such a fundamental dynamism, such a fundamental openness of quantum systems is, for me, in a certain very wide sense, the basis, the ultimate basis of any freedom in our universe. Because without such a thing, you would live in a world that is a clockwork, and I think it is a good chance that we don't live in a world that is a clockwork, but this is my personal taste.
Yes. Questions? Yes, please, David.
I think you've emphasised how much we're learning about how things function microbiologically.
Yes.
It seems to me that emphasises how little we understand morphology of organisms.
Yes.
You know, the gap between, and we all share the same DNA.
Yes.
How it is determined that what the particular morphology of an organism will be. It's an extraordinarily big gap in biological understanding at the moment, it seems to me. Would you agree?
I totally agree. I think that all the new developments in epigenetics are exactly trying to cover somehow this gap. The problem is that according to a traditional geneticist approach to such kind of problems, the genome was able to determine univocally a certain phenotype. And this is actually not true at all. This is the problem. That is, it is clear that there is no univocal map from a genome to a genotype. So we need to take into account, first of all, very complex self-regulative processes, especially gene able to control the development of certain functions in the organism, but also the way in which the organism relates to the environment. Obviously, I am really I am a Darwinian, so I don't think that there is any kind of instructions from the environment going toward the organism. That is, the environment is always a sort of represents always a sort of negative feedback relative to the organism. But the fact remains that the organisms have an incredible capability to carve out environmental stimuli that are in principle noxious to their own needs. So the organisms are able to establish circuits to which what is noxious at the beginning becomes even a source of growth, and development. This is for me what is really very, very interesting and important. So if we take the two things together, that is self-regulation together with the inability of co-adaptation, organism environment, probably we could do steps along this pathway, but obviously it is a very difficult problem. But I agree, obviously, I agree. Obviously these kinds of problems are much easier to deal with.
Okay, so the gentleman here on the left, and then we'll go back. Yes, please, sir, yes.
Okay, so you've emphasized that selection is always guided by formal constraints, right?
Not guided. That is, you need the selection plus formal constraints.
Okay.
These are two independent factors, but they work together when complex organisms and so on come out.
Okay.
But they are two independent factors.
So my question is, how do these two dependent factors, namely the formal constraints and selection, how are they related to chance?
At the beginning, the problem is that you would not have no change in nature without some perturbation, and so without some chance. because without some perturbation, the organism will remain forever in its own homeostatic state. So, the problem is that chance and perturbation are the source of any possible variety, obviously. The point is, for me, that what is interesting with life is this particular ability, because obviously any perturbation is obviously a perturbation of a set of constraints, because what is the homeostatic state of an organism? It's a set of huge correlations in the organism, that is the working together metabolic and genetic system, and so on. So the whole order represented by the organism, this is perturbed by a certain chance event, or even by a certain mutation inside of the organism. Now, what is the interesting point is that the ability of the organism to contract such a perturbation and to integrate such a perturbation in its own dynamism. This is the reason why organisms change through development, even through evolution on a phylogenetic scale. That is, they are able to integrate such a perturbation in their own development, in their own evolution. And obviously the point is that they will never recover exactly the same initial state. Obviously, because if they could, this would mean that they are able to control completely their environment. But if they are able to control completely their environment, the perturbation would not have a reason at all. So if a perturbation arises, this means that I am not able to control completely my environment. You see my point? But the interesting point is that you have a selection, you have a perturbation, and the organism tries to integrate it in the formal constraints. Obviously, and here comes selection. That is the solution. My solution, that is the way in which I do this integration, fits certain environmental condition or not. And so, this game between selection and constraints will find the results in more or less appropriate solutions. But what I would stress is that if we understand the problem from this point of view, is that you can only have more or less appropriate solution. You will never have the best solution. This never occurs in nature, or very rarely. So, for me, we should understand the selection not in the way that selection builds the fittest organism, but only that the selection throws away what is not very much fit. But there is a huge amount of diverse possibilities once that you have such a selection filter. It's very important. So it is a very dynamic game.
Okay, there's a question. I think, lady, did you have a question? Sorry. Yes.
You talked about selection,
yes,
variety, and this last discussion we've just had, which results in very, very, very simple organisms, single cellular organisms, exhibiting goal behavior, goal-driven behavior, ability to manipulate and manage themselves within the environment.
Yes.
And this is obviously external to the organism.
Yes.
And I just wondered from the way you were speaking that it's only when we come to man that we start to look internally for these things. We start to look for internal goals, internal motivations, and that's what psychologists would do. Yeah. And I'm just saying, from what you've said, are psychologists looking in the wrong place?
This is a totally different kind of problem, because humans, this would be a very long discussion, but the problem is that humans are the only kind of organisms able not only to control information in the environment, but able to interpret information. I don't think that any other organ, I don't think even that the information interpretation is necessary in nature outside humans. What I am trying to tell is that what humans do, let me give an example. An ape is in general able to understand some perceptual relations, and also very complex, or some analogies even. An ape can understand, for instance, that a key stands to a lock with the same relation as a can opener to a can. So it is already a very complex way to, but these are perceptual. what is typical of humans, I mean, at least from Homo erectus, as far as we can guess, because obviously we don't have proofs for that, is that humans are able to catch information that is hidden in our environment. That is, they are able to understand the relations between events that are very far away from a spatial and a temporal point of view. And also they are also able to guess the minds of others. This is the point. That is, they are psychologists. Apes don't understand the mind of others in general. They understand very well behavior, that is the external manifestation. But humans understand the intentions, the intentionality of other beings. Humans understand the possible consequences on a very far away future of certain acts. So humans are able to understand things that are not as such in the domain of our primary experience, where with primary experience I understand our perceptual experience. This is precisely the fact that allows humans to speak and deal with concepts that have no representational content at all, like God, imaginary number, black holes, and so on.
Okay, we'll question at the back on this side, and then we'll kind of back to that side again. Please, at the back. Yeah.
Yes, right through my mind when you were speaking there, sir. Bishop Berkeley came up of perception, and in the mind of God, the thing or the activity exists. The Platonic question of the one and the many. But I really am fascinated by this God as emergent monism.
Yeah.
Can I suggest God as emergent energism in that monism? Because what you've shown us today is the forward energy surge of creation. That it's not static, it's not homeostatic, because that's death, isn't it?
No.
Paul says in Acts 17, in whom we kinometa, we have movement, we are moved.
Sure.
Creation is movement from a point to a point. And it's the divine, as the Eastern philosophers and theologians talk, the energia, the divine working, in working. What we're seeing here is you wonderful scientists are bringing to us, laymen, the wonderful in-working of creation. The outworking is in the in-working, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you very much. You know, this is very interesting what you say, because let me put the things in this way. If we would have a perfect, total description of our universe, of any part of the universe, I mean, this is obviously impossible. But let's speak only for the sake of understanding. That is a sort of computer-like description of every detail of the universe. This would not be the universe, because it lacks energy. So this is, if we'll from a pure metaphysical, theological point of view, this is the same distinction that St. Thomas did between act of being. This is act of being. This is to exist. Is connected with a sort of intrinsic dynamism. And the essence is, on the contrary, totally static. So you can think everything you may assume about somebody or something, but this is not that thing or that person. Because it lacks still an act of being. So I agree. Obviously, energy is only the physical aspects of that, because this can manifest itself in many different forms. But I totally agree. More the formal constraints are, on the contrary, more the static aspects, if you will. But obviously they are very necessary too. So the universe is an interesting mix of different aspects and different things. And probably the old understanding the understanding of the old mechanist science was a very reductive one, in the way in which it does not enable us to understand the world really in all its complexity.
We had a question here, please, yes, and then we go back. Yes,
I may not have fully understood you, but do your ideas apply to the emergence of life from non-life, pre-bacteria?
I don't dare to say or I think this is a too huge problem, much bigger than me, to tell in which way life was formed, or is a reason. I don't dare to tell that. What I like to do is something much more confined. That is, what I like to show is what are the necessary conditions for having something like life. What are the necessary requirements? But this does not mean that I am able to explain how life is real. I don't have this knowledge, unfortunately.
We had a question about that, please. Yes.
I think it's one of the hardest lectures for a lot of people here to digest. Luckily, I went to a lecture last weekend about E. coli alumni given by the engineering faculty, but he said he allowed one of his students to solve the problem because biochemistry was now done in a way it wasn't done when the director of the team was learning it. In the same way, I think you've made a marvellous summation of information theory and how it's a level which exists in its own right nowadays, and it's what we mean by the information age in some way that brings to bear on all this. It just seems to me, when I look at these structures, as I say, I've had another chance recently to do so, just the way in which those four coding molecules fit together, I mean, the absolute subtlety and perfection of the whole scheme. I mean, if you want to find God, that's a very good place to start.
Something else had a piece, yes.
Yeah, you talk about perturbation being the key, yet most organisms have error correction,
Yes,
which
this is true.
which is sort of denying perturbation. So surely, the perfect organism is one that has perfect error correction and is constant, because it ensures its. So, isn't there a conflict in what you're saying there?
For me, a perfect organism is a dead organism. That is, in life is contained this fact. That is that I have also answered just before by telling that any solution is never perfect. That is, you have only more or less adaptation, but never perfect adaptation. So you cannot have perfection in life because, as I have said, life is an integrated system. If you would have any functionality working at the best, then the whole system would break down, because you would have a complete anarchy, because each part would be totally perfect in itself and be a system apart. So in life it is inbuilt a certain imperfection, but error correction is the perfection of life, in my opinion. That is the fact that even bacteria are able to correct themselves, because we can always do errors. This is sure. But what is important is that we have also the capability to correct errors. And this is, in my opinion, the perfection of life, a dynamic perfection. And I would say even that this is what makes we humans humans. That is, let me say this with the words of the big American philosopher Charles Peirce. That is, obviously our theories are fallible. This is clear. But the interesting point is that in the long time run, we can converge on truth. That is, even if we don't have a total, complete understanding of the truth, we can converge. Why? Because we can correct ourselves. So, for me, what is interesting in the history of science are not the truths, because, okay, this is also interesting, but for me are much more interesting the errors, and the way in which errors have been corrected. I have beautiful examples of that. For instance, Einstein published in 1935 an incredible paper together with Podolsky and Rosen about quantum mechanics that was finally wrong, because the paper was proposed an interpretation of quantum mechanics that is wrong. But there are, I think, more than 2 million papers written about such a paper. I think that the whole development of physics has been determined in the last century by such a paper. Interesting error for me. Very interesting one.
Well, I'd love to carry on the discussion. We do promise people we finish by 2, and it's just past 2. I'm sure Gennaro would be happy to stay around for a bit and carry on answering questions if you have some more. But for the moment, let's just thank him for a very mind-stretching presentation.